In a random sample of 80 Mass residents, 28 approved of the performance of the governor. Find a 98% confidence interval for the proportion P of all Mass residents that approve of the governor's performance. Interpret your answer in everyday language. So this is a proportion problem where we're looking for the proportion of all Mass residents that approve of the governor's performance. So what we usually do is work with a sample proportion, P hat, which is the number of successes R out of the total number of trials, which is N. So in this problem, that's the number of people that were actually question total, which was a random sample of 80 Mass residents. Only 28 approved of his performance. And if we divide this on our calculator, we get our value of P hat. It's 0.35. So our sample proportion is 0.35. And what we want is to base this sample proportion on finding the true population proportion for all Mass residents. So we want a 98% confidence interval. So let's go to our formula sheet and look up confidence intervals for proportion. For P, we have, well, NP and NQ first of all, 1 minus P is Q, have to be greater than 5. Actually, in the notes, we use greater than or equal to 5, and you should use that on the test. Given we check that, then our confidence interval is nothing other than P hat, which we already have, minus and plus an error. And they tell you what the error is. We have to carefully look up Z with a correct confidence level, multiplied by a square root of P hat, which we already have, 1 minus P hat, which is the same thing as Q hat, and divide that by N, which we have as well. So let's copy down this formula and plug in some numbers. So we have P hat minus E and P hat plus E. Again, we already have our P hat. And E, error, is ZC. And in this case, the confidence level is 0.98. Z.98 times square root of P hat, which is 0.35, times the complement of P hat, Q hat if you will, which is 0.65, over N. And what's N again? N is the total number of people in the trial, which is 80. Now, we do have to verify one thing first before we look up Z.98. We have to check that both NP, or NP hat, since that's all we have, and NQ hat are both greater than or equal to 5. So if we take 80 and multiply it by 0.35, and we take N, which is 80, and multiply it by 0.65, we have to double check that we get numbers that are both greater than or equal to 5 in order to use this approximation. And when I do this, I get NP hat is 28, and Q hat is 52. Both are greater than or equal to 5. And so we can use our formula for confidence interval. Now, the only thing that we said a moment ago that we're missing is Z.98. Let's get that from our C table. So if our confidence level is 0.98, our critical value is 2.33. So let's punch that into our formula. 2.33 multiplied by this whole square root, 0.35 times 0.65 over 80. And what we should do on your calculator is multiply the two decimal numbers, then divide by 80. After you get that answer, take the square root, then finally multiply by 2.33. Carefully work that out. When you do, I get approximately 1.243. So a 98% confidence interval for the governor's approval is going to be his 35% minus, 0.1243, 35%, plus 0.1243. And on my calculator, if I work that out, that gives me 0.2257, or just over 22%, to 0.4743, or just over 47%. What do these two values mean? In other words, interpret your answer. Based on our sample of 80 residents having 28 approve of the governor, we can be 98% confident that the proportion of all Mass residents that approve of the governor is between these two values. In simple terms, we're very confident that the proportion of people that approve of the governor's performance is below 50%.